James Whittaker wasn't the kind of man who showed up unannounced. At 50, his life was a carefully orchestrated symphony of boardroom deals and late-night emails each day, mapped out with the precision of a Chicago train schedule. His real estate empire, gleaming towers and luxury condos spanned the city's skyline from the Loop to Lincoln Park, a testament to a life spent building wealth at the cost of connection. But on a gray October afternoon, with the wind carrying the first bite of winter through Pilsen's colorful streets, James stood outside a peeling brownstone on 19th Street, an envelope in his hand. It contained the final paycheck for Elena Morales, who'd cleaned his office in the John Hancock Center for nearly 5 years. She was a ghost in his world, arriving after hours, leaving no trace but polished floors and emptied trash cans. Then last Tuesday, she vanished. No call, no explanation. The office manager mentioned personal issues, and when James tried wiring her pay, her account was blocked. It bothered him more than it should have, this break in routine from a woman who'd never faltered. He knocked on the chipped red door, the sound swallowed by the hum of Pilsen buses, rumbling a street vendor calling out tamale orders, kids laughing as they raced bikes down the sidewalk. Inside, he heard a clink of pots, a child's shout, and then footsteps. The door swung open, revealing Elena, her dark eyes wide with shock. At 36, she carried the weight of her years lightly, her black hair tied back in a loose braid, a worn blue apron over a faded t-shirt and jeans. "Mr. Whittaker," she said, her voice tight, almost disbelieving. "What are you doing here?" Before he could respond, a boy of about 9 darted into view, his t-shirt smeared with ketchup. "Mom!" "Sophia won't let me use the markers," he whined, then stopped staring at James with open curiosity. In the background, a teenage girl, maybe 16, slouched on a couch, her face half hidden by a hoodie, sketching in a battered notebook. The air smelled of roasted chiles and warm bread, a stark contrast to the sterile chill of James's penthouse. "I brought your paycheck," James said, lifting the envelope, his tone softer than he meant it to be. "And I wanted to make sure you're okay. You've never missed a day." Elena's gaze darted to her kids, then back to him, hesitant. "Mr. Whittaker, I'm sorry, I can explain." She started, but the boy cut in. "Who's this guy, Mom?" "My boss, Lucas," she said quietly, ruffling his hair. "Well, former boss," James corrected himself, the words feeling strange. He stepped closer, taking in the apartment. It was small, barely 500 square feet, with cracked plaster walls and a threadbare rug. A sagging couch sat against one wall, covered in a bright quilt. Crayon drawings and intricate sketches were pinned to the walls, a mix of childish scrawls and something more art, with a raw, almost desperate edge. The place was cluttered, but clean alive, with a warmth James hadn't felt in years. "Can I come in?" he asked, surprising himself. "I'd like to talk." Elena hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her apron, then nodded. "Sure, sir. Sorry about the mess." She stepped aside, and James entered feeling oversized in his tailored coat among the mismatched furniture. Lucas bounced onto the couch, still eyeing him. "Do you live in a skyscraper?" he asked. James smiled, caught off guard. "Something like that." Elena gestured to a small table where a half-eaten plate of tacos sat next to a pile of school books. "These are my kids," she said, her voice cautious. "Sophia, my daughter, and Lucas, my son. It's just us." She didn't elaborate, but the weight in her words hinted at a story of absence. James sat the envelope still in his hand and glanced at Sophia. She hadn't looked up, her pencil moving in quick, jagged strokes across her notebook. One drawing caught his eye, a charcoal sketch of a city street rain-slicked and shadowed with a lone figure, hunched under an umbrella. It was striking, almost painful in its intensity, and it stirred a memory of his late wife Clara, whose paintings had carried the same raw emotion before cancer stole her away. "Why'd you stop coming to work?" he asked, keeping his voice even. Elena's shoulders stiffened. "It's Sophia," she said, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "She's been struggling. There was trouble at school. Some kids ganged up on her, spread lies online. She's been withdrawing. And Lucas, he's young, he needs me here. I couldn't leave them, and I couldn't afford help." Her voice wavered, and she looked away, brushing a stray hair from her face. James leaned forward, his eyes on Sophia's sketchbook. "What happened at school?" he asked. Elena glanced at her daughter, who was still lost in her drawing. "She's always been quiet, loves her art," Elena said. "But these girls, they mocked her sketches, posted them on social media with cruel captions. She stopped going to class, started shutting me out. I've been trying to reach her, but—" She trailed off, her hands clenching. Lucas, sensing the shift, climbed onto the couch beside James. "Sophia's drawings are the best," he said proudly. "She made me one of a dinosaur." He grabbed the notebook and flipped it open before Elena could stop him. "Lucas, don't," she said, but Sophia didn't react, her eyes fixed on the floor. James hesitated, then looked at the open page. It was a sketch of a girl surrounded by jagged lines like shards of glass, her face obscured but radiating pain. It hit him hard, echoing Clara's own struggles with depression before her illness. He closed the notebook carefully, his throat tight. "She's got real talent," he said, his voice low. "Something special." Elena's expression softened, a flicker of pride breaking through her worry. "She does," she said. "But she doesn't believe it right now." Lucas tugged at James's sleeve. "Do you draw?" Mr. James chuckled, the tension easing slightly. "Not me, but my wife. She was an artist. Loved it like Sophia does." The mention of Clara slipped out, and Elena's gaze sharpened. Was she asked softly. James nodded, his fingers tightening on the envelope. "She passed 5 years ago. It's still hard." The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Elena's eyes held his, a quiet understanding passing through. "I'm so sorry," she said. "That must have been tough." James shrugged, deflecting. "It's life. But you're dealing with a lot. I want to help." Elena blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Whitaker, we'll figure it out. I just need time to find new work, get things stable." James looked around the apartment again. The stack of bills on the counter, the worn shoes by the door, the love stitched into every corner despite the strain. He thought of his mansion in Lake Forest, all cold marble and empty rooms, a house that hadn't felt like a home since Clara. "Elena." He said the words coming before he could second-guess them. "I have an idea." She tilted her head, wary. "What kind of idea?" He leaned forward, his voice steady. "I need someone to run my home, not just clean it, but make it a place worth living in. There's space for you, Sophia, and Lucas. A big garden, a pool, rooms of their own. You could bring them with you, and I'd pay you twice what you made at the office." Elena stared, her mouth slightly open. "Mr. Whitaker, why would you offer that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. James didn't have a full answer, not yet. Maybe it was Sophia's sketches, so like Clara's, or Lucas's boundless energy filling a void he hadn't named. Maybe it was Elena's quiet strength holding her family together against the odds. "Because you've been reliable," he said, choosing his words. "And because I think we could all use a fresh start." Lucas, still perched on the couch, piped up. "Does your house have a basketball hoop?" Elena shot him a look, but James laughed, the sound surprising him. "Not yet, kid, but we could get one." Sophia finally looked up, her eyes meeting James's for a moment. They were guarded, but there was a spark there, a faint curiosity, that gave him hope. Elena stood crossing her arms. "Mr. Whitaker, this is a lot to process. Moving my kids, changing everything. I know James said standing too. Think it over. Talk to Sophia Lucas. I'll call tomorrow to check in." He handed her the envelope, their fingers brushing briefly. "One last thing," he added, glancing at Sophia. "Your art, it's powerful. Don't stop." Elena's eyes glistened and she nodded, managing a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Whitaker." As James stepped back into the chilly Pilsen air, the sounds of the neighborhood wrapping around him, he felt something shift. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't on contracts or profits. It was on a teenage girl's haunted sketches, a boy's ketchup-smeared grin, and a mother's tired but fierce determination. He didn't know if Elena would take his offer, but as he drove toward the glowing Chicago skyline, the image of her small, vibrant apartment stayed with him, a quiet challenge to the emptiness he'd lived with too long. The Lake Forest mansion stood like a fortress of quiet wealth, its ivy-covered stone walls catching the soft November light as James Whitaker watched a dusty Toyota Corolla roll up the gravel driveway. Elena Morales had called 3 days after his visit to Pilsen, her voice measured but resolute, accepting his offer to manage his home. Now she was here wresting a battered suitcase from the car, while her kids, Sophia and Lucas, tumbled out their expressions, a mix of awe and uncertainty. The estate sprawled across 6 acres with rolling lawns, a shimmering infinity pool, and a glass-walled art studio that had sat untouched since Clara James's late wife lost her battle with cancer. At 50, James had grown used to the mansion's silence, its vast rooms echoing with memories he couldn't escape. But as Lucas darted toward a row of oak trees, shouting about a butterfly, and Sophia clutched her sketchbook like a shield, James felt a strange mix of anticipation and doubt, as if he were stepping into uncharted territory. Elena approached, balancing a duffel bag on her hip, her dark eyes scanning the property. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, setting the bag down, "this place is overwhelming." "James, please," he replied, offering a small smile. "And it's a lot, I know. Too much for one guy." He gestured toward the double doors. "Let me show you around." Lucas was already halfway across the grass, chasing the butterfly, while Sophia lagged behind her hoodie, pulled low, her gaze fixed on her sneakers. Inside, the mansion's opulence hit them like a wave. A soaring foyer with a polished marble floor, a chandelier dripping with crystal, and a staircase that curved like a ribbon to the second floor. Elena's boots echoed faintly, and she shot James a look, as if wondering if she'd made a mistake. "It's stunning," she said, her tone polite but guarded. James led them to the kitchen, a sleek expanse of black granite and chrome appliances, its island large enough for a banquet. Lucas scrambled onto a bar stool, spinning until he nearly toppled. "This is like a movie set," he exclaimed, grinning. Elena grabbed his arm. "Lucas, settle down." But James waved it off. "Let him have fun. This place needs some life." He pointed to a corridor. "Your rooms are upstairs, but there's something else first." He guided them to the art studio, a sun-drenched space with tall windows, blank canvases, and shelves of paints and brushes, all gathering dust since Clara's last days. Sophia's eyes flicked up, scanning the room, her fingers tightening on her sketchbook. "This was my wife's studio," James said softly. "She'd want it used." Sophia stepped inside, touching a jar of brushes, her expression unreadable but curious. They moved in that afternoon, claiming 2 bedrooms in the guest wing, spacious rooms with plush bedding and lake views. Elena took the larger one for herself and Sophia, while Lucas bounced into the other, flopping onto the bed. "It's like a bouncy castle," he shouted. Elena smiled faintly, but her hands fidgeted, betraying her unease. "This is too much, James," she said later, as they unpacked groceries in the kitchen. "We're used to squeezing into a one-bedroom apartment." "You'll adjust," James said, hoping he believed it. "Your job's to make this place a home. Cook, organize whatever feels right. The kids can roam free." Elena nodded, but her eyes were distant, like she was bracing for the catch. Over the next 10 days, the mansion began to shift. Lucas's toy cars littered the hallways, and the air carried the scent of Elena's cooking tamales, one night chicken adobo the next. James used to microwave dinners or takeout from his own restaurants, found himself lingering at the table, savoring flavors he hadn't tasted in years. But Sophia remained a ghost, slipping between her room and the studio, her sketches growing darker, swirling storms and fractured figures. One afternoon, James found Lucas struggling with a math worksheet, his pencil snapping in frustration. "This is dumb," Lucas muttered, scribbling over a fraction. James pulled up a chair. "Need a hand?" Lucas shrugged but pushed the paper toward him. They worked through it together, James explaining division with patience he didn't know he had. By the end, Lucas was grinning, his worksheet complete. "You're better than my teacher," he said. James laughed, warmth spreading in his chest. Elena watched from the doorway, a dish towel in her hands. Later, as they loaded the dishwasher, she said, "You're good with him. He doesn't usually trust people so fast." James shrugged, feeling oddly exposed. "He's easy to like, full of energy." Elena hesitated, then asked, "Did you and your wife ever have kids?" The question caught him off guard, piercing the armor he'd built around Clara's memory. "We wanted to," he said, his voice low. "Clara had a miscarriage, then got sick. We ran out of time." Elena's face softened, her eyes holding a quiet empathy. "That's hard," she said. "I've been on my own since Lucas was born, but losing someone like that, I can't imagine." James nodded, his throat tight. "It's been 5 years. I thought I was past it." But he wasn't, and Elena seemed to sense it, her silence a kind of understanding. The next evening, James wandered to the studio and found Sophia painting a chaotic canvas of deep purples and blacks, a figure caught in a whirlwind. "That's powerful," he said, leaning against the door frame. Sophia flinched, her brush streaking across the canvas. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you," James added. "It's just, you've got something special." Sophia's cheeks reddened and she mumbled, "It's nothing." But she didn't cover the painting, and James took it as a small victory. He wanted to tell her how her work reminded him of Clara's, how it carried the same raw emotion, but he held back, sensing her walls. The transition wasn't smooth. Elena moved through the house like a guest, her touch light, as if afraid to leave a mark. One night, as she served arroz con gandules, her hands shook slightly, betraying her strain. "Everything okay?" James asked, passing her a plate. She sighed, setting down a serving spoon. "I'm grateful, James, really. But this feels like someone else's life. I've always handled things myself. Bills, kids, everything. Relying on you, it's hard." James studied her, the lines of worry etched around her eyes. "You're not relying on me," he said. "You're making this place better. It's been empty too long." Elena's lips twitched, almost a smile. "You're not what I expected," she said. The guy in the fancy office seemed colder. James chuckled, but it was tinged with truth. "Maybe I was. I'm trying not to be." The first real crack appeared a week later. James overheard Sophia arguing with Elena in the kitchen. "I don't belong here," Sophia shouted, her voice breaking. "This isn't our house," Elena tried to calm her, but Sophia stormed to the studio, slamming the door. Lucas, playing nearby, looked up at James. "Why's Sophia so mad?" he asked, clutching a toy truck. James crouched down. "She's figuring things out, buddy. It's a big change." But he worried, seeing echoes of Clara's isolation in Sophia's outbursts. That night, he found her in the studio, asleep at an easel, a half-finished painting of a broken bridge under a stormy sky. He draped a blanket over her, his heart heavy. Her art was a cry for help, and he wasn't sure how to answer it. The next morning, Elena met him in the kitchen, her eyes tired. "Sophia's struggling," she said, stirring a pot of coffee. "She feels out of place, like we're intruders." James poured a mug, sliding it to her. "She's got a voice in her art," he said. "Maybe that's where she'll find her way." Elena took the coffee, her fingers brushing his, and for a moment they stood close, the air heavy with unspoken questions. Outside, Lucas's laughter rang from the garden, chasing another butterfly, and James felt a quiet resolve. This house could be more than a shelter. It could be a place to heal, if they could find their way together. The Lake Forest mansion had started to hum with life, its once sterile halls now scattered with Lucas's comic books, and the faint aroma of Elena's cooking today, a simmering pot of carne guisada, filling the kitchen with warmth. A month into their new arrangement, James Whittaker found himself waking to the sound of Lucas's footsteps racing down the stairs, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence that had defined his mornings for years. At 50, he'd built a real estate empire that towered over Chicago, but the mansion, 6 acres of pristine lawns, a gleaming pool, and Clara's untouched art studio had been a hollow shell since his wife's death. Now, with Elena, Sophia, and Lucas bringing chaos and color, the house felt alive, though not without its cracks. Sophia, 16, spent hours in the studio, her paintings growing bolder but heavier, with unspoken pain. Elena moved with a quiet diligence, managing the household, but holding herself at a distance, as if afraid to fully settle. James, meanwhile, wrestled with his growing attachment to them, a feeling that stirred both hope and fear. One chilly November afternoon, James found Sophia at the kitchen island, her phone buzzing incessantly as she ignored a plate of Elena's empanadas. Her hoodie was up, her eyes shadowed, and her fingers gripped her sketchbook like a lifeline. "Everything okay?" James asked, pouring himself a coffee. Sophia shrugged, her gaze fixed on the counter. Elena, chopping onions nearby, gave James a subtle shake of her head, signaling another rough day. Lucas burst in from the backyard, his coat dusted with leaves. "James, I found a frog by the pool," he announced, holding up muddy hands. "Can we keep it?" James chuckled, grateful for the distraction. "Maybe in a jar for a day, buddy. Wash up first." Lucas groaned, but ran to the sink, leaving Elena to sigh over the mess. Her hands, steady as they diced, trembled slightly, a telltale sign of the strain she carried. "Sophia, you going to school tomorrow?" James asked, keeping his tone casual. Sophia's jaw tightened, her fingers pausing on her phone. "Dunno," she muttered. Elena set her knife down, her voice gentle but firm. "Mija, you've skipped 4 days this month. You need to go." Sophia's eyes flashed. "What's the point? It's not like anyone cares." She shoved her chair back and headed for the studio, leaving her plate untouched. James exchanged a look with Elena, who shook her head. "She's been like this all week," Elena said quietly once Lucas was out of earshot. "Something's wrong, but she won't talk." James nodded, his mind flashing to Sophia's latest painting, a jagged cityscape under a sky of fractured stars, raw with emotion that reminded him of Clara's darkest work. Hoping to lift the mood, James took Lucas to a community center in Lake Forest that Saturday, where the boy had joined a robotics club. The center, A squat building with vibrant murals buzzed with kids tinkering with circuits and parents swapping stories. As Lucas ran off to join his friend Ethan, James noticed a poster on the wall, Winter Art Fair, December 5th. Showcase your talent. The idea struck him instantly. Sophia's art, so powerful and personal, could shine in a setting like this, maybe give her a spark of confidence. He pocketed a flyer, already imagining her paintings on display, but he knew convincing her would be a battle. Back at the mansion, he showed the flyer to Elena, while she folded laundry in the utility room. "What if Sophia entered?" he asked. "Her work's incredible. It could be good for her." Elena's hand stilled, her brow furrowing. "James, she's too fragile right now. Putting her art out there, it might break her." James leaned against the wall, undeterred. "Or it might show her she's enough. She's hiding, Elena. Maybe this is a way out." Elena's eyes met his, conflicted. "I'll ask her, but don't push." That evening, over a dinner of carne guisada and rice, James broached the idea. Sophia's fork stopped mid-air. "No way," she said, her voice sharp. "I'm not showing my stuff to people who'll just laugh." Lucas, chewing loudly, piped up. "But your paintings are so cool. Soft, like Avengers-level cool." Sophia rolled her eyes, but a faint flush crept up her neck. "Just consider it," James said, keeping his tone light. "Your art says things you don't." "That's powerful." Elena steered the conversation to Lucas's robotics club, but James felt Sophia's gaze linger on him, a mix of defiance and curiosity. Later, as he helped clear the table, Elena pulled him aside. "She's scared," she said, her voice low. "Not just about the art. Something's eating at her, and I'm losing her." The next morning, the truth slipped out in a way James hadn't expected. While Elena was at the market, Sophia left her phone on the living room couch, its screen lighting up with a notification. James glanced at it, intending to ignore it, but the message froze him. "Still drawing your sad little pictures. Everyone knows you're a loser." His chest tightened. He knew he shouldn't pry, but the cruelty of the words echoed what Elena had said about Sophia's school troubles. When Sophia came downstairs, James handed her the phone, his face neutral. "You got a text," he said. Sophia's eyes widened, and she snatched it, her hands shaking as she read. "It's nothing," she snapped, but her voice cracked. James stepped closer, his voice gentle. "Sophia, if someone's hurting you, you don't have to face it alone." She glared at him, tears brimming. "You're not my family. Stop acting like you care." The words cut, but James held her gaze. "I do care. And those kids, they're wrong. You're stronger than they'll ever be." Sophia's lip trembled, and she bolted to the studio, slamming the door. When Elena returned, James told her about the message. Her face hardened, anger mixing with fear. "It's those girls from her old school," she said, gripping a bag of groceries. "They've been harassing her online since that incident in Pilsen. I thought leaving would stop it, but it's followed her." James felt a surge of anger, not just at the bullies, but at the weight Elena carried alone. "What happened back then?" he asked. Elena set the bag down, her voice low. Her dad, Miguel, walked out when she was 10. Promised he'd come back, never did. Then these girls at school started targeting her, posting her drawings online with awful comments. She stopped trusting anyone, even me. James's jaw tightened. "She needs to know she's safe here," he said. "Both of you do." Elena's eyes met his, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them, a shared resolve tinged with something deeper. "I'm trying," she said. "But I'm scared. I'm failing her." Determined to help, James spent the next few days researching the art fair, even emailing the organizer to secure a spot for Sophia if she agreed. He also threw himself into time with Lucas, who'd taken to following him around, asking about everything from skyscraper designs to why the pool water sparkled. One afternoon, as they built a model rocket in the garage, Lucas said, "Sophia's sad. Because of mean kids, right?" James nodded, taping a fin to the rocket. "Yeah, but she's tough like your mom. She'll get through this." Lucas grinned. "Mom's like Wonder Woman. She never quits." James smiled, but his thoughts were on Elena, her strength, her quiet sacrifices, the way she made the mansion feel like a home. The art fair loomed, and James took a chance. He found Sophia in the studio working on a new painting, a stark image of a girl standing in a rainstorm, her silhouette blurred but defiant. "I signed you up for the fair," he said, bracing for her reaction. Sophia's brush froze her eyes, narrowing. "You had no right," she hissed. "I'm not doing it." James held her gaze. "You're ready, Sophia. Your art's honest. That's more than most people can say." She didn't answer, but she didn't tear up the flyer he left on the table. That night, Elena found him on the patio, the lake reflecting a crescent moon. "She's thinking about it," she said, pulling a shawl around her shoulders. "I don't know how you got through to her, but thank you." James shrugged, his heart lifting. "I just want her to see what I see." The fair arrived a bustling Saturday at the community center. Sophia tense, but there submitted 2 paintings, including the rainstorm piece. The room hummed with locals admiring artwork kids running between displays. James watched Sophia linger near her paintings, her hands in her pockets. An older man, a local gallery owner, stopped to praise her use of shadow, and Sophia's face lit up a rare smile breaking through. But the moment shattered when James overheard a snide voice, a girl from Sophia's old school standing nearby. "She thinks she's a real artist now, lame." Sophia's shoulders slumped, her confidence crumbling. James stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Leave, now." The girl scurried off, but Sophia fled to a quiet corner, her breath uneven. Elena followed, her face tight with worry. Back at the mansion, Sophia locked herself in the studio, refusing to speak. Elena sat with James in the kitchen, her eyes red. "I pushed her too hard," she said, her voice breaking. "This was a mistake." James shook his head. "She showed her work. That's huge, Elena. She's got fight in her." Elena looked at him, her voice soft. "You're good for us, James, but I'm scared. I'm starting to need you, and that's dangerous." James's chest tightened, a mix of warmth and uncertainty. He wanted to reach for her, to say he felt the same, but instead he said, "You're not alone anymore. We'll figure this out." They sat in the quiet, the weight of their shared hopes and fears settling like dust, binding them in ways neither could yet name. The Lake Forest mansion had transformed in ways James Whittaker never imagined possible. By mid-December, the once silent halls echoed with Lucas's laughter as he raced toy planes across the hardwood, and the kitchen carried the comforting scent of Elena's cooking. Today, a bubbling pot of pozole rojo prepared for a small gathering. 6 weeks into their unconventional arrangement, the estate no longer felt like a relic of James's past with Clara, but a living, breathing home alive with the chaos and warmth of Elena, Sophia, and Lucas. At 50, James had spent decades building a real estate empire that dominated Chicago's skyline, yet nothing had prepared him for the quiet joy of mornings filled with Lucas's chatter, or the sight of Sophia's paintings brightening the walls. But beneath the newfound rhythm, uncertainties lingered. Sophia's confidence, bolstered by the art fair, remained fragile, and Elena, though more at ease, still carried a guarded edge, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. James, too, wrestled with his growing feelings for Elena, unsure if he was ready to name them or risk disrupting the fragile balance they'd built. One frosty morning, as snow dusted the mansion's sprawling lawn, James found Elena in the kitchen, kneading dough for homemade tortillas. Lucas was at the island coloring a picture of a spaceship, while Sophia sat nearby sketching quietly, her phone mercifully silent after weeks of blocking her old bullies. "Smells amazing," James said, grabbing a mug for coffee. Elena smiled, her hands dusted with flour. "Just something simple for tonight. My mom's coming to visit, so I wanted to feel like home." James raised an eyebrow. "Your mom? That's big." Elena nodded, her smile tightening. "Yeah, Maria's been in a rehab facility in Chicago since her stroke. She's better now, strong enough to travel, but she's traditional. I'm not sure how she'll take all this." She gestured vaguely at the mansion, her eyes betraying worry. James set his mug down, leaning against the counter. "She'll see you're happy. That's what matters." Elena's gaze softened, but doubt lingered. "I hope so," she said. Maria arrived that afternoon, stepping out of a taxi with a cane in one hand and a worn leather bag in the other. At 62, she was a small woman with sharp eyes and a face lined with both hardship and warmth. Lucas ran to her, shouting "Abuela," and nearly knocked her over with a hug. Sophia followed, more reserved, but her smile was genuine as she kissed her grandmother's cheek. Elena embraced Maria tightly, whispering something in Spanish that made Maria's eyes glisten. James hung back, feeling like an outsider, until Maria turned to him, her gaze appraising. "You must be Mr. Whitaker," she said, her accent thick, but her English clear. "James, please," he replied, extending a hand. She shook it firmly, her eyes never leaving his. "My daughter tells me you've been good to them," she said. "I want to see for myself." James nodded, sensing the weight of her scrutiny. The tour of the mansion left Maria visibly stunned. The grand foyer, with its soaring ceiling and sparkling chandelier, made her pause, and the art studio where Sophia's latest painting, a vibrant mural of a Chicago sunrise, hung proudly, drew a soft gasp. "Mija, this is yours?" Maria asked, touching the canvas lightly. Sophia nodded, blushing. "It's nothing, Abuela." Maria shook her head. "It's everything. You've found your voice." Lucas tugged at Maria's sleeve, eager to show her the pool, now covered for winter, and the treehouse James had built with him in the backyard. As they wandered, James caught Elena watching her mother, her expression a mix of pride and anxiety. Later, over pozole, in the dining room, Maria peppered Elena with questions about the kids' school, Sophia's art, and James's role in their lives. "This is a big change, Elena," Maria said, her tone careful. "Living in a man's house with your children, it's not what I raised you for." Elena's spoon paused. "It's not like that, Mama. James gave us a chance, a home. It's working." Maria's eyes flicked to James, unreadable. That evening, as Lucas and Sophia showed Maria their rooms, James and Elena cleaned up in the kitchen. "She's protective," Elena said, scrubbing a pot. "She thinks I'm giving up my independence." James dried a plate, his movements slow. "Are you?" he asked. Elena paused, her hands still in the soapy water. "No," she admitted. "This place, it's more than I expected. I'm starting to feel settled. That scares me." James set the plate down, his heart racing. "It scares me too," he said. "I haven't felt like this since Clara. Like I'm building something real." Elena looked at him, her eyes searching, but before she could respond, Lucas burst in, holding a drawing for Maria. The moment passed, but the air between them felt charged, heavy with possibility. The next day, Maria's visit took a serious turn. Over coffee in the living room with snow falling outside, she turned to Elena. "The doctors say I'm stable," she said. "I can move back to my apartment in Pilsen. I want you and the kids to come with me." Elena froze her mug halfway to her lips. Sophia, curled up on the couch with her sketchbook, looked up sharply. Lucas, playing with blocks on the rug, didn't seem to register the weight of the words. James felt his stomach drop, the warmth of the room replaced by a sudden chill. "Mama," Elena said carefully, "we've built something here. The kids are happy." Sophia's painting again. Lucas loves his school. Maria's eyes narrowed. "This isn't your home, Elena. It's his." She nodded toward James, who sat silently, his hands clasped tightly. Sophia's voice broke the tension. "I don't want to leave," she said, her tone firm but shaky. "I'm better here, Abuela. I'm me again." Maria's expression softened, but her resolve held. "Your children. This is temporary. Family stays together." James stood, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "Maria, can we talk privately?" She nodded, and they moved to the study, a wood-paneled room with shelves of books Clara had loved. James closed the door, facing Maria's piercing gaze. "I know this looks strange," he began. "A single man, a big house, your daughter and grandkids living here. But they're not just guests. They've changed this place, changed me." Maria crossed her arms. "What are your intentions, James? My daughter's been hurt before. So have her kids." James took a breath, choosing his words. "I care about them. More than I thought I could. Elena's strong, but she doesn't have to do this alone. I want them to stay, not as employees, but as a family." The word felt bold, almost reckless, but it was true. Maria studied him, her eyes softening slightly. "You're in love with her," she said. Not a question. James swallowed, his face warming. "I think I am," he admitted. "But it's not just about that. It's about giving them a home, a chance." Maria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze drifting to a photo of Clara on the desk, a reminder of James's past. "Elena's always put others first," she said finally. "Her kids, me, everyone but herself. If she stays, it has to be her choice, not yours." James nodded. "I know. I'd never ask her to stay out of obligation." Maria's lips curved into a faint smile. "You're a good man, James. But good men can still break hearts. Be careful." They returned to the living room where Elena was reading to Lucas, Sophia sketching nearby. Maria sat beside Elena, taking her hand. "Mija, I see how happy you are here," she said. "If this is what you want, I trust you. But the kids, they're yours to decide for." Elena's eyes glistened, and she squeezed her mother's hand. "Thank you, Mama." That night, after Maria retired to the guest room, James found Elena on the patio, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the snow-covered lawn. "She's right," Elena said, her voice soft. "This isn't my house, but it feels like home, and that's confusing." James stood beside her, the cold biting his skin. "It's your home if you want it to be," he said. "Not just for the kids, Elena. For you." She turned to him, her eyes searching. "What are we doing, James? This isn't just a job anymore." He took a step closer, his heart pounding. "I know. I want you to stay, not because you have to, but because you want to. I want us to figure out what we could be together." Elena's breath caught, and for a moment they stood in silence, the snow falling softly around them. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," James said, his voice raw. "But I haven't felt this alive in years." The next morning, Sophia and Lucas joined them for breakfast, the tension from Maria's visit lingering but lighter. Sophia, usually quiet, spoke up. "I got accepted to an art program," she said, her voice steady. "It's at the Art Institute, part-time. I want to do it." Elena's face lit up, pride breaking through her worry. That's incredible, Mija. James grinned, raising his coffee mug. To Sophia, future artist. Lucas cheered, spilling juice, and the laughter that followed felt like a release. Later, as Maria prepared to leave, she pulled James aside. "You've given them something I couldn't," she said. "A chance to dream. Don't let them down." James knotted his throat tight. "I won't." That evening, the mansion glowed with string lights Elena had hung in the garden, a small celebration for Sophia's acceptance. They ate tamales and laughed as Lucas tried to teach Maria to play Uno the snow falling gently outside. James watched Elena, her smile brighter than he'd ever seen, and felt a certainty settle in his chest. This wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was the one he wanted: a family, not born, but chosen, built on trust and second chances. What city and state are you reading this story from? Drop a comment below and let's connect.